Oseo,
Oseo.
Cherokee greeting. Stop time and kill the story of the time-stopping story that killed the killer of time in the story of my life. Stop and I will kill stops in all stories with timeless knives. Now this wound in the end begins again, and now my blood is free to flow into that great flood. Mother of our mother in mud. Summer solstice, the sun has stopped, and that's where we begin here. And my way of celebrating that and illustrating it is here. This is my illustration, and it is the Stone of Bell. It is located overlooking the Truckee River in Nevada. The Truckee River runs through Reno out to Pyramid Lake, about 30 miles east of Reno is this stone. There's a huge outcrop of rock coming out of the side of the hill, and it's got many petroglyphs all over it. This is located at the west end of that outcropping. Highway 80 has cut through that outcrop, and what once used to be a roadside stop is no longer accessible. And that's about where this stone is located. And it's a kind of a gnome like on the sundial, that goes around like this, but the gnome on this stone goes light and dark like this. And it operates from the winter solstice to today, the summer solstice. And it is inscribed in Celtic. Now, Celtic are people who were widespread all over Europe, stemming from the very east part of Europe and all the way through the British Isles and on across the Atlantic into America or Turtle Island and continued. Where the Catholic Church kind of overran Europe and the Celtic culture continued here in America continuously and continued on into a southwestern people whom the Americans call the Navajo. That's part of what I'm talking about here. But here to look at the inscription on the rock, this is Yah Hu Bel. That's the reading of it. To describe this stone, it's about between 5 and 6 feet high. It's tapered. It's composed of crystalline granite, like that. And at the top of the bowl of the stone is a perfect round bowl, maybe a gallon and a half size bowl. And above the bowl, there's a lip. On the lip is this inscription above it. And this large X here next to it is this Celtic inscription. Now, Bel is not a god or a deity, and is not to be confused with the Semitic Baal. Bel is a quality of sunlight, and the sun in Gaelic is Grain or Grainer. Bel seems to have stemmed from the earlier Hindu languages as Sul or Suli, the daughter of light. It's actually where he became her son, her Savul, but it means the quality of sunlight, and that's how it's rendered. In Egypt, you have Ben, that is the Greeks render as the obelisk. The obelisk is a Greek rendering of the Egyptian Bel speaks. That means it's a tall, tapering dress stone that the sun shines on, and maybe inscriptions were put on that in Egypt. So that's part of the idea of this. And Yah, who is the name of the all-living goddess, if we can put it that way. In the specific inscription, it's the moon. Robert Graves, in The White Goddess, has done a very competent study on exactly this. He has that the Yahu Bel has originated in Egypt. It has also then stemmed into other renderings, like the Hebrew rendering. I'm trying to say Yahweh is kind of a pseudo rendering of these sounds. Yeah, Yahweh, like that, the tetragrammation, and so forth like that. But this is the original Yahu bell, and you can find it in Robert Graves here. And basically it's meaning, to exalt the moon. And what the C stands for in Gaelic is Kalma, the dove, because there isn't any other way to write Hu in this system. So Hu is the goddess of the moon, and the dove that's the way to say it. The dove is the goddess's dove. So that's the way we're saying it. And Bel. So the X in the writing system of Ogam is a diphthong, or a sliding vowel, so yeah, like that, and so forth. So that's how this is all rendered in Gaelic language there. The Navajos are people living in Arizona. The name Navajo seems to have somehow been dubbed by the Spaniards. Exactly where they got the name, nobody seems to know. It's maybe a Spanish dialect, basically meaning keepers of the field. The field was evidently, these people had orchards, and their Spanish maps have said Depachu de Navajoa, rendering as people, keepers of the field in that way. The people themselves are the Tine, and they stem from and are still related to people in West Central Asia. And this is attested by the roots of the language of the Navajo is Turkestanic. A modern Navajo person can understand a modern Turkish person speaking. So attest to that. And the people have come from that region of Khotan, which is at the very western end of the Himalayas, and their relation to the Tibetans is attested in this study of the Tibetans and the Navajos, where the author has taken both cultures. They are both on the same latitude, at the same altitude, both on high plateaus like that, and both on almost making a biverse world, and how very much alike their cultures are, this. So it's a thorough study of that the Navajo culture we're talking about and the Tibetan culture we're talking about have very much that is alike, not only coincidental. And both peoples have been subject, to the onslaughts of dominant imperialism and have continued to survive, and that is definitely a hope for us because it shows their resilience in all of that. So the Navajo part of it is really what I'm wanting to emphasize in this talk. So to begin, the winter solstice, we're now imagining this stone is in the dark, in the shade. And at the winter solstice, then we have the eagle, the winter eagle, we call it, flies up and puts a light on the top of the stone. So I have the eagle here. And then as the months go, light is coming over the stone, until today, the summer solstice. This is now the glory of Bel, meaning the glory of the light of the sun and all that. So starting back there with the winter solstice, then we're starting with the Navajo version of this. And the Navajo version is the birth out of this water here of born for water is what he's called. And he is born out of the waterfall. So the water has filled up the bowl, and the bowl has overflowed. And it's made a waterfall down here like that. And then Coyote, he comes in and he raises the child up and holds the child up like that. So that's what's happening here. This is the water bearer, blue, and all the blue is called blue body, and blue is nurturing. It's the color of nurturing. So we have all the blue and all of the water there. And this is a rendering actually of Born for Water, is what we're calling him there. And the marks on his body, his insignias, come from this here. Now this is a chant for this very thing. Henne-ya, ho-ho-ho, henne-ya, 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 yo, henne-ya, henne-ya, way-ya, henne-ya, ho-ho-ho. That's how it starts and it goes on. Now, born of water from the water opening, the live turquoise exists in my body, and monsters in vain attack me. In a dangerous world you are traveling. Now born of water I am as I go about. From the water opening I am he who goes about. A live turquoise in my body exists as I go about. So now emergence from its very rim I come. Hey, 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 now first woman's home from the center of its room I come. Hey, hey, hey. Home tapered from its center upon itself has returned. Hey, hey, so now from below emergence place, he lifts me up. Hey, hey, therefore with me he upholds. His magic with me he upholds. His magic with me he upholds. From below emergence he upholds with me. Hey, 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 hey. So that's a chant for all of this. Here's Coyote, and I've affected this water in the pool of water down here. Now what's really amazing is in the Navajo they have chant ways. There are hundreds of them, chant ways. And in the one I'm referring here in this chant way, where the Hatali is the chanter. And he has made a clay replica of this stone. In the Navajo, this stone is called the Sky Reaching Rock, complete with the lake on top, which is called Lady Soul Lake. And here I've made this little replica as similar to what the Hatali makes out of clay as part of the sand painting for the whole piece. So by this I'm representing the Hatali, the chanter. The Navajos are quite different from other people in that they don't have the kind of mystical shaman, that sort of thing that other people have. Their culture seems to be, rather more scientific. The chanter has to learn, how to chant these, and maybe a chanter will know one or several of these, and people will go to maybe someone who can diagnose their disorder, whatever it is, and then they'll know what Hatali, what chanter has the right chant for that. And in that they make sand paintings is what we call them. I have a small rendering of one here to show, the lodge here, teepee, and so forth. So it's based on, a real system that the chanter has to learn. He is learning from a senior chanter and so forth. And this still exists in that way. And so that's all the way that this is being rendered with the Navajo, the Dene. Again, the Dene here are called the Nak Dene over there in the region of Khotan, West Turkestan is the region for this. And the Navajo's relation to the Tibetans are not only Buddhists, and they haven't always only been Buddhists. They have an indigenous culture as well, and that indigenous culture was also widespread in that region in Central Asia, into Central Asia. And people who still live there that would be related to these people who call themselves by the same name, that they weave rugs, just as the Navajos in the Southwest, they weave rugs, and I actually have one. And they make maybe about 100 a year like that. So they are much related to the same people. Pictures of them, they look much like people here. So you can get that idea of the relations and how they've come to be here. Somebody asked me, how did they get here? But they got here on Chinese ships. Between mainly the 14th and 16th century, the Chinese had ships from the Ming Dynasty out on the oceans. A book, 1492, also has traced this and has shown places where the Chinese have colonized, even in eastern part of the United States. And a Chinese ship that sunk up in the Carquinez Straits out of San Francisco Bay. So Chinese old anchors, is what I'm trying to say, have been found here on the west coast. Professor Moriarty of San Diego State wrote a paper on the Chinese anchors found off of Palo Verde there. So they came on Chinese ships, and they've come here between the 14th and 16th century. And in Gladys Reichard, she shows how that they have a lore, the Navajo lore, that they traveled here from San Diego over there to the part of Arizona that they inhabit, that they call Dinata. So all of that is here relevant and very relevant for our times. Now, while we're still here in the summer solstice, let me give you a poem by Mary Oliver. The sunflowers. Come with me into the field of sunflowers. Their faces are burnished discs. Their dry spines creak like ship masts. Their green leaves, so heavy and many, fill all day with the sticky sugars of the sun. Come with me to visit the sunflowers. They are shy, but want to be friends. They have wonderful stories of when they were young, the important weather, the wandering crows. Don't be afraid to ask them questions. Their bright faces, which follow the sun, will listen, and all those rows of seas, each one a new life, hope for a deeper acquaintance. Each of them, though it stands in a crowd of many, like a separate universe, is lonely. The long work of turning their lives into a celebration is not easy. Come, and let us talk with those modest faces, the simple garments of leaves, the coarse roots in the earth, so uprightly burning in the wild, shapeless air. Thank you. Happy summer solstice.